You know that feeling when you open your bank account and instead of panicking, you actually feel a small relief, like a heavy weight just lifted. It's not $1 million moment, not even six figures. It's smaller than people expect. For me, it hit when I realized I had $20,000 saved, enough to cover unexpected bills without sweating. The first time I saw that number, I didn't scream or celebrate. I just leaned back, felt a shift in my brain, and understood that survival mode was over. Before this, every decision was tactical. Pay the rent first, skip the extra dinner, and question every purchase. I had been stuck in that cycle for years, taking the first job that came along, ignoring career growth opportunities, and saying yes to things I didn't even want just because I needed the money. And honestly, it was exhausting. Every expense felt like a threat. A flat tire, a laptop crash, or a rent hike could ruin my month. Even small indulgences, like a night out or ordering delivery, came with guilt. I was trapped in constant mental math, wondering if I could survive the week, the month, the unexpected emergencies. Then came that first financial buffer. It wasn't a jackpot, just an emergency fund that crossed a threshold most people ignore. $20,000 didn't make me rich, but it changed everything. I started seeing opportunities instead of threats. I could say no to toxic work situations, consider a side project, or even invest in something with calculated risk. The difference wasn't just in numbers. It was psychological. My brain finally had breathing room to think strategically instead of reactively. I realized how much I had been controlled by fear. Before this, a new car offer would feel like freedom. Now it felt like a potential trap. Instead of obsessing over small purchases, I could focus on big picture decisions, investments, career moves, housing, and real wealth building strategies. Even paying for an expensive course or conference stopped feeling like a gamble because I had room to absorb risk and pursue growth. The numbers alone weren't life-changing. It was the confidence and options they unlocked. And here's the kicker. Building that 20,000 wasn't easy. It meant skipping luxuries, tracking every dollar, and delaying gratification for months. It required discipline, patience, and consistency. But in the process, I learned something far more valuable than money. I could control my finances, and that control translated into control over my life. That first milestone felt impossible at first, but reaching it proved I could handle challenges, plan ahead, and finally start thinking about wealth instead of survival. Once I hit that 20,000, I noticed something subtle but powerful. I stopped reacting to every financial hiccup like it was a crisis. My car broke down. Frustrating, yes, but now fixable without panic. My laptop died mid-project. Annoying, but I could replace it without compromising bills or sinking into debt. Even the unexpected rent increase felt manageable. I could negotiate or plan without fear clouding my judgment. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was positioning myself. Every dollar I had saved became a tool, not just a number on a screen. With that buffer in place, I started thinking differently about opportunities. A friend suggested investing in a small local business. Before, I'd have said no immediately, worried about loss. Now, I could actually run the numbers, evaluate risk, and make a rational decision. I began noticing similar chances everywhere, side hustles, networking events, even career moves that required some initial risk. Money was no longer a chain holding me back. It was a lever, giving me flexibility and control I never imagined. The psychological shift was profound. I stopped obsessing over trivial expenses. Fancy coffee, a casual night out, even dining at a higher-end restaurant no longer triggered guilt. Not because I was careless, but because I realized those small amounts pale in comparison to strategic financial decisions. Where I lived, what I drove, how I invested. Those were the moves that truly impacted my financial trajectory. The mental energy saved by ignoring micro decisions freed me to focus on growth and planning instead of endless calculation and stress. And here's something most people miss. Once you break past that first milestone, compound interest becomes tangible. That 20,000 doesn't just sit there, it starts working for you. Even a conservative 8% annual return adds up quietly, consistently. Each month, I added savings. My money generated more money, and suddenly, hitting the next milestone didn't feel like climbing an impossible hill. My confidence in handling finances grew, and with it, my willingness to take calculated risks. Investments, freelance projects, professional courses, things I avoided before due to fear of overextending. Finally, this milestone changed how I approached my career. Before, I tolerated toxic bosses and unfulfilling projects because leaving felt risky. With 20,000 as a cushion, I could negotiate better, push back when necessary, and explore opportunities without anxiety. Even applying for a promotion or new position no longer required sleepless nights over what if I fail. I could walk into negotiations from a place of strength, not desperation. That financial safety didn't just change my bank balance. It transformed my mindset, my confidence, and my life. With that 20,000 safely in my account, I started noticing how it influenced decisions I never thought about before. Renting an apartment, I wasn't just picking the cheapest option. I was calculating long-term value, commute time, and even potential appreciation if I ever wanted to buy. Buying a car? The flashy new models lost their appeal once I realized how much money they would quietly bleed from my future investments. Even vacations were different. I no longer booked impulsively. Instead, I thought strategically. What experiences added value without derailing my financial plan? It was like seeing life through a lens I didn't know existed. Investing became more than a concept. It became a habit. I could explore index funds, bonds, and small business opportunities without fear. Each decision, even as small, now had impact and purpose. The returns were no longer abstract numbers on a page. They were real steps forward. And the crazy part, the more I saw my money grow, the more confident I became in taking calculated risks. Offers I would have ignored before now made sense. Opportunities to freelance, consult, or join side projects weren't threats. They were potential growth engines. Money was finally amplifying my life instead of restricting it. The psychological shift didn't stop there. I noticed my stress levels drop dramatically. Unexpected bills, car repairs, medical emergencies, they were no longer catastrophic events. I could handle them calmly and efficiently. Even my social interactions changed. Conversations about money with friends or colleagues no longer made me defensive or anxious. I could participate with perspective, giving advice when asked, making decisions without fear, and even spotting opportunities others missed because they were too preoccupied with survival mode. And here's the subtle but powerful truth. Reaching this milestone taught me discipline in ways that went beyond finances. Delaying gratification, tracking spending, resisting impulsive purchases, these habits spilled into other areas of life. I started approaching career decisions, personal development, and even health with the same focus and long-term thinking. Saving 20,000 wasn't just an accomplishment in numbers. It rewired my brain. I was no longer a passive participant in my life. I was actively shaping my future with intention. Finally, the freedom this milestone created was transformative. I could leave a toxic work environment without panic. I could negotiate for promotions and pay raises with confidence. I could invest in myself, take short-term risks, and explore avenues that previously seemed impossible. It wasn't the money alone. It was the freedom, the clarity, and the perspective it unlocked. Once you reach this level, you realize the first 20,000 isn't just money. It's the foundation for everything that follows. With the 20,000 milestone behind me, the world started feeling different. Every financial decision became less about fear and more about opportunity. Negotiating my salary was no longer nerve-wracking. I could walk away if the offer didn't align with my value. I noticed how much easier it was to spot genuine investments versus hype. Suddenly, side projects, real estate deals, or small business ventures weren't intimidating. They were logical steps in a broader plan. The money didn't just sit there. It was actively teaching me how to leverage every decision for growth. Even daily habits transformed. I stopped obsessing over minor expenses that didn't matter in the grand scheme, like cutting corners on groceries or cheapening every purchase. Instead, I focused on high-impact moves, optimizing housing costs, scaling income streams, and understanding long-term investment potential. The psychological lift was incredible. I felt calm, empowered, and capable, not anxious about the next bill or paycheck. Every dollar now had a purpose, and each decision carried weight because it fit into a clear vision of financial freedom. Work dynamics shifted too. I approached projects with more confidence and clarity because I no longer acted out of desperation. I could turn down unreasonable tasks, take on opportunities that expanded my skills, and negotiate for assignments that mattered. Even my colleagues noticed the change. Subtle authority, calm decisiveness, and strategic thinking drew respect. It wasn't arrogance. It was simply the natural result of having options and clarity. Financial independence didn't just change my bank account, it changed how I carried myself in the world. And here's the kicker. Every new milestone after the first 20,000 became easier. My investments grew faster, side projects yielded better results, and opportunities multiplied. The discipline, habits, and mindset I developed while reaching 20,000 created a snowball effect. Compounding wasn't just about money. It was about skill, confidence, and timing. By the time I looked at my portfolio a few years later, the growth felt almost inevitable. That first major threshold had shifted the trajectory of my life entirely. Finally, I realized something crucial. This milestone wasn't about achieving a temporary sense of wealth. It was about creating options, building confidence, and mastering a mindset that could scale indefinitely. I could now see the bigger picture, plan for decades ahead, and approach every financial and life decision with intention. 20,000 wasn't an end. It was the starting point for freedom, strategy, and long-term success. And once you understand that, everything else falls into place, almost effortlessly.